Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Shang, and today we have Andre Yee, who is the founder and CEO of Tiga AI. Thanks you so much for joining us, Andre.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Tiga and what is it you guys do and what makes a good customer for you guys.
Yeah, so Tiga is an AI assistant to amplify human-centric selling. And I know that that can seem like a mouthful, but here's what we mean by that. We think that there's a kind of selling, a lot of it in B2B, that will be human to human for quite a while. And let's just say for the foreseeable future. And while there's a lot of talk about AI replacing humans, we see the primary challenge is really how do you amplify the human seller? How do you make the human seller 2x, 3x better, more effective than they are today? And so that's essentially what we're solving for. We think there's a huge opportunity to do that with combining, generative AI with sort of best practices and embedding it into the workflow of the seller. So
Yeah. And what ends up making a good customer for you guys?
yeah, we target right now, we target mostly uh, fast-growing SMBs and also mid-market. We do have some clients that are larger that are running pilots with us, but basically that's who we target right now, primarily because we're at the phase we really value getting feedback very quickly. And I love enterprises. I love the ability to expand. But that being said, there's usually a longer lead time to get going with an enterprise. So it's a lot faster and more efficient for us to sort of be deployed in a SMB and mid-market sort of setting.
Absolutely. Um, We'd love to kind of talk about the origination for Tiga, but before we kind of get there, you've had a pretty extensive background, I would say, in terms of specifically around product development, R&D, right? Before you started doing some of your more entrepreneurial endeavors, becoming a founder yourself and CEO and things.
Sure.
But walk us through kind of like that, the early, maybe like the first chapter of your career, where it
Yeah.
was more on product development, and what created the interest in that space initially, before we kind of jump into the entrepreneurship stage.
Yeah, sure. So my background is really engineering, software engineering. So the early part of my career, I was a software engineer. I quickly found that the thing that I really loved to do though was really lead technology team. So if you look at there's a first 4 or 5 years of my career, I was an engineer, and then after that was mostly managing teams, and I love that. I love building product. I had the really blessing to be with some great product teams and a number of companies that were public companies that was sort of my background and has been, and I've really traversed a lot of different spaces, which is very interesting from a technology and product building standpoint. I've been in early part of my career in tax accounting software, not necessarily the most exciting, but necessary in the world we live in. I got into systems management, middleware, application integration, security. But the last 16 years or so, I've been in sales and marketing tech, and that's primarily what I've done in the last 16 years or so. And the way I did start with being an engineer, then transition into managing technical teams, but eventually I ended up, I had an opportunity to lead a company actually when I was in the cybersecurity space. It was a turnaround, and that was my first sort of foray beyond just the product role. I actually ended up being the interim CEO and then eventually took over full time. It was a company called NFR Security. It was not in good shape. As I like to say, they never give you the job when things are going swell. So it was a turnaround. We turned it around successfully, raised around, and then we actually sold it to Checkpoint Software. So that was my first foray into sort of broader, just really the CEO role. And eventually it kind of led me to start my own company.
Got it. And what was that first company that you started?
Yeah, it was actually, I had a nice run prior to starting my first company. I had a nice run with a company called Eloqua, some marketing automation, really pioneer. I wasn't a founder, but worked with some really great folks there. I was the head of product there, and we grew in a 6-year period, 5.5, 6-year period. We grew from sub 15 million in ARR to 125 million in ARR. We did an IPO and we sold to Oracle for around about $1 billion, which was great. A lot of my fellow executives, they wanted to find the next Eloqua, meaning they want to find the rocket ship that's taking off and jump on it. And I had the audacity to think I could build the next Eloqua. So it led me to start a company called Triblio. We're an account-based marketing platform. We competed with the likes of Demandbase, Terminus, 6sense eventually came into the space. So, and it was a great run as well. It was a lot of lessons learned because the journey, at the time I started the company, I was already fairly experienced, but the journey, most of my career was taking companies that were, say, 10 million in ARR and scaling it to 100 million and beyond. It's a completely different journey to go from literally 0 to 10, right? I mean, 0 to 1 and then 1 to 10, right? So a lot to learn. It was an experience I had. It was really my last company, and it was successful. I mean, we ended up growing the business, not quite as successful as Eloqua, but really we ended up growing the business for 5.5 years, and we sold it to a company called IDG, International Data Group, and it was a really good outcome for investors, for the employees, for us as founders. So it was a great experience, and I stayed with IDG for 2.5 years, and then last year, left to start Tiga AI. So
Yeah. And I saw that you have a little bit of break there between IDG and Tiga. So walk us through what that was like. Obviously starting a company, being able to sell it and exit it, have a successful outcome for yourself, for your investors. That's a lot. And then there's got to be something super compelling for you to try to do it again, because you know what it's like to go from 0 to 1, and
yeah.
it's an entirely different beast. So what was that thing that motivated you? And then we can talk more about where Tiga is now.
Yeah, so you're right. I left in January, and we really started Tiga in April of last year. So I had a little time off. Some of it is, I really think it's really important to take care of your, this is all about leadership and thought leadership, but it's really important to take care of your own life, right? I think that's a really, really important part. I've always believed as a leader, the most important thing is you've got to be in a good frame of mind, because if you're a force multiplier, uh, both for good and for bad. Like if I'm not in good shape mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it affects a lot of other people. So I think a lot of it was, I had some personal stuff I just wanted to take care of. My father was not feeling well; he was ill, and so I wanted to have time to do that kind of thing. And then, it gave me a time to sort of decompress, look at different ideas and opportunities. And I decided to do Tiga primarily because I felt like the go-to-market motion for B2B companies is under massive transition right now. I spend a lot of time talking to go-to-market leaders in my network. And what I was shocked during the time that I was off and sort of exploring was how many of them were saying, yeah, I'm rethinking my go-to-market, how I go to market. And, granted, you always get some of that, right? Like people say that, but this was, I would say, easily 2 out of 3, maybe even 3 out of 4 folks that I talked to were saying, yeah, I am. And when you dig deeper about why this is the case, I think no one person, no two individuals express it identically, but you saw certain themes. One was the era of cheap capital is over. You're being squeezed. And so it's forced marketing and go-to-market leaders to look at how they go to market, because you're under pressure. And one particular point that was under pressure was the SDR group. There was a lot of interest in sort of revisiting that and saying, rethinking how that should be done. I think that's one pressure point. The other pressure point of why go to market is changing is because I think outbound has hit a little bit of a wall. It's not as easy. Everyone we all have received those emails that we summarily ignore and delete. And when you talk to the people that that focus on calling, they'll tell you email's broken. And when you talk to people that focus on email, they'll tell you no one picks up the phone anymore. I mean, basically it's like, outbound is really, really broken. And I think that those are some of the pressure points I heard, and causing people to rethink. And so it led us to go down this path to say, how can you rethink, and in this age of where you can leverage generative AI, how can we you know change the game or add value? And what I saw a lot of was that there was a greater movement to one, move to full cycle account executives. A lot of organizations were saying, I did the math on the SDR thing, doesn't add up to me. We're getting rid of them. Others are saying, hey, we'll still have SDRs, but we'll just have fewer of them, right? Focus on maybe the upper end of the market. And then yet others were saying, yeah, we'll still have our SDR team, but they're going to change the way they work. More research, more relationally connecting, more thoughtful outreach. So that's what I mean when I say it was in transition. Everyone's sort of rethinking the way it's done. And so we think we've got an answer to that. Obviously, we have a point of view. And yeah, so we see generative AI as an impact event for sales teams, and we want to play our part in that.
Yeah, makes sense. And definitely, I have my own takes on it too. Just being a go-to-market person
Yeah.
and seeing and talking to a lot of different sales and marketing leaders, right? I think one of the tricky things to navigate is that some of the things I think about that keeps me up is like, regardless of what is out there, to craft personalization, better messaging, do the research. I know like leveraging generative AI for the purpose of research and creating personalization is something that people talk about a lot, versus like just, removing the salesperson entirely,
Yep.
but using it for that purpose. My concern, and I mean, I'm open to your thoughts on this, is like you mentioned, things like email, LinkedIn, while not dead, has become more convoluted with noise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think almost to the point with, the advent of all this AI, depends on how you use it, but I feel like there's a lot of tools out there leveraging AI that's almost like handing over a loaded gun to an infant in some stages, right? Where it's like you're giving them access to all these tools that's just going to ultimately over inundate a channel where, even if I'm selling a cure for cancer through one of those channels, like my problem isn't ultimately product. It's like ultimately the ability to capture attention through these channels.
Yep.
What are your
I, I actually 100% agree with you. The way I explained it to my co-founder, as we were exploring this was, by the way, it's not an easy solution.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I want to say. But I said to him, I said, Mike, imagine that you wrote me a really nice letter inviting me to your, an event, right? Your party you're throwing. And you took the time to write it out, and you really added some really personalized notes to it that is so touching. You spend like 3 hours writing that. I said, here's the problem. You drop it in my mailbox, and on that particular day, I got 1,000 junk mail. I said, the problem is I might never even see or open your thing because I'm sorting through the 1,000, right? That's essentially the essence of the problem. And it's so I do agree with that. And I've also been saying that your analogy of the loaded gun, I'm about to in the next few days, I'm about to write a post about this concept of just how on LinkedIn, I'm going to write something on how generative AI has a deflationary effect on personalization, right? And it's just a catchy way of saying basically personalization. It's going to make us rethink the personalization. It used to be like, hey, I'd look for Chris, I'd find some obscure thing. Maybe we both went to Georgetown University or whatever, and then I'd just key onto that. Well, that's not going to be good enough anymore, right? Those are what I call random acts of personalization. That's not going to work anymore. So I think there's no way to get around. That's why I think outbound needs to be reinvented in a lot of ways. What I didn't say to you earlier was when I spoke to these GTM leaders, I spoke to not just CROs, I spoke to account executives. I spoke to even a couple of senior BDRs, strategic BDRs. And one of the questions I tried to unpack during my discussion with them was this: what do the best sellers do? I mean, I acknowledge the issue that you were just mentioning, Chris, but like there are still people that prospect and they do it quite effectively. What do they do? And, and so that was the number one question I was trying to unpack in my conversations, besides others, but that was probably the chief question. And what I found was that a lot of them, they followed a certain pattern, a framework, maybe I shouldn't say a pattern. It's more like a framework. Like they would really research. They would try to make relational connections. I know this doesn't sound very profound, but they research, they do deep research. They try to make a relational connection. And then the other thing they do is they try to have insight-based interactions, right? Not just randomly, but actually try to have interactions based on insights, things that are either happening in the life of the account, the life of the buyer that matter, and interact on that basis. Now, like I said, it's a framework, it's very broad strokes, but that's what they do. And the challenge behind that, as I talk to a lot of especially the individual contributors, that the top AEs, is that they say this approach takes a lot of time to do, right?
Yep.
And so essentially what Tiga is all about, that was really the spark. If you want to say like, what are we really trying to do in more detail? That's really what we're trying to do. How do we help you do what the best sellers do, but do that at scale? Right.
Okay.
And by the way, that is not the return to mass blasting thousands of people all at once and hoping two of them reply. That's not what we're talking about. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say in a lot of these conversations, some of our listeners have seen from our past webinars with various, sales leaders and things like that, marketing leaders. Uh, there's definitely like a return to, I think, like those commodity-based sellers that have done really well historically selling commodities, meaning like
mm,
no key differentiator from your competitor's product or service, because
mm,
at the end of the day, it depends upon the seller and their skill set of like how they
mm,
sell. Somebody's actually buying from that individual, not about the product, not about the company.
mm,
Super critical. And the things that you mentioned, I think, like are all things that are those key ingredients. I'm curious to your take on this, because another thing that I've seen a lot of them say that you need to do to become a successful salesperson now in 2024 and going beyond is becoming an altruistic problem solver for your target market, right? And I think it's like when we saw SaaS grow in this past decade from like 2010 to 2023, call it, you didn't have to be a great salesperson necessarily to close a bunch of deals and to make quotas and all that kind of stuff. But as cost of capital has become much more expensive, people are definitely much more conscientious and cautious. Um, and as part of that exercise, um, I've seen a lot of founders, CEOs, but also, sales leaders that are making the decision to go all in on sales as becoming like a sales leader and building almost, like an influencer strategy around LinkedIn and becoming
mm,
on LinkedIn, right? And that to me is like it's spending the time to not go and slide in somebody's DMs, but like engage with them through a target accounts posts, but doing
yeah,
that at scale, right? And then also
yeah,
then taking the learnings that they have seen and whether that has a direct correlation to their ROI of their product or service doesn't necessarily matter, but does have a direct relationship to their target market's immediate problems. And sharing content and thoughts around that. What is your take on that kind of stuff? Because obviously that's an investment of time, resources,
hmm,
it's longer tail sales cycle, right? But
yeah.
it's a way that I've seen become successful for some of these companies that are like in that growth stage.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic when they do it. And I've seen some entrepreneurs and leaders do really, really well with that. I wish I could do that more consistently. I want to say a couple of things though to that. And I think one is that as an entrepreneur, you have to know yourself, like, and you also have to know how you work. I'm not a person that likes to post trivial things. So I only post every 2 to 3 weeks. But when I post, like I've thought through something, I have a very distinct point of view, and I want to make a particular point. Now, it leads to my second point. When you do these kinds of things as founders, as leaders, I think you have to be authentic and you have to know yourself. Like I'm not a person like I said, like I can't do these trivial. Every now and again I do it, but I don't feel good about it. Just I have to feel it when I post something. I have to really feel. I'm not just doing it to just to get the likes and comments going or whatever. But I think there's a balance between being authentic, but also having the discipline, right? So carving out time, and there's some people that are just naturally very good at that. It's
Well, I
very
know
second nature.
I do know a few of them that I have thought that way about actually don't do it themselves. They actually,
Ah,
and they're not even, I mean, they're not even in sourcing it internally. There's a few companies that will do that for
wow.
you. There's a guy that I met because he's the son of a guy named Andy Paul, who is the host of Win Rate, a Win Rate podcast, and he's a sales leader,
Ah,
and his son basically helped him scale his presence on LinkedIn to close to 1 million followers and high engaging content.
wow.
So then his son has taken that playbook and then working with other B2B SaaS leaders on building it out. I know, for example, like Adam Robinson from retention.com is
Yeah.
using one of these guys. And then there's also a YC company called Rhetoric that just recently came out and raised a seed round that does that for you also. And
Oh, wow.
the only way that they're doing it successfully is it's not, I think they haven't figured out how to scale it necessarily because it's still very much like an
Mm,
agency format. And it is like interviewing the CEOs or the founders once a week, getting a data dump of what they are basically dealing with and being able to create and craft a narrative. But basically,
interesting.
yeah, I mean, you know, I know, like, for example, if there's a company that generated 2.5 million in revenue from his social media, his LinkedIn profile alone, which ended up becoming their company's 80% of their company's annual revenue from
Yeah.
his LinkedIn profile, right? From what seemed to be organic, but obviously he had an agency manage it for him. Everything from not just the posting though, but also then that interactiveness of engaging with target accounts and then
Wow.
that those target accounts to then slide into his DMs, right? And then learn more about the
It's so interesting. You've just taught me something here, Chris. I didn't know that. I mean, I've seen Adam Robinson's posts. He's very prolific, I would say. So,
he's
uh,
not doing it by himself, is all I'm gonna
so
say.
that's the thing I didn't know, and it makes sense, right? There are a number of folks like that, and that what you said, makes sense that there are a lot of folks are getting an assist at the very least from like an agency or an agency style. Yeah, for me, I can, like I said, I can only do it every two or three
Yeah,
weeks.
no,
But
of course. I agree.
I do say this. It has gotten really good responses. I've gotten like every time I do it, like boom, a bunch of leads come in, or just even if they're not direct leads that convert to sales, they are important conversations that then lead to further business or collaborative partnerships. So and that's even among people who take the time to reach out to me. And I know sometimes I'll get on a call with someone and they said, "Oh yeah, I was reading your post, by the way, and that's how it intrigued me, so I wanted to check you guys out and that kind of thing."
Yep.
So yeah, it's powerful. Obviously, there's an assumption there, which is your market is on LinkedIn, right? Like that's
Yeah.
partly
Yeah.
what's assumed.
Yeah. And I mean, so, you mentioned Tiga is more so for like SMB mid-market, right? Which is maybe not on LinkedIn because I do know, like, if you talk about legacy businesses or generational businesses, which a lot of these SMBs can be, right? Like I think about, I don't know, I've helped SaaS companies sell everything into like funeral homes
Oh wow.
to like gyms and logistics companies, freight forwarding
Yeah,
companies. Those tend to be
yeah.
like generational companies, right? So,
I see.
um,
There are a lot of small companies though that are on. like, so when we say SMBs, we're typically talking about companies that are like 50 employees to,
Yeah,
500. And then, when we think of mid-market, we're ourselves, we're thinking about a company that's 500 employees to 1,000 or, a couple of thousand. So we're talking about sizable companies, but the reason we like in the early stages to sell to them, and it was the same when I was at Triblio, is because they're much easier to, it's much easier to sell to them. And when you're at the stage where you're trying to get feedback for your product and
yeah,
work interactively. So yeah,
yeah.
that's,
Yeah, I'm curious too, is like outside we talked about kind of like email as a channel, LinkedIn as a channel, cold calling as a channel. Uh,
mhm.
I mean, how do you think about go to market and empowering these sales teams um, in a way that helps them to stand out? Like, what is Tiga helping to leverage AI for that individual sales rep
Yeah.
to
So
gain attention?
yeah. So one of the things we do is we start with that process of deep research. You basically the motion is basically most salespeople, 80% of their accounts are assigned to them. You're either syncing it from the CRM or they have a list somewhere and they load it up with some contacts. And essentially what we do is we help you research those accounts. So we save you a lot of time researching so that as the human seller, so to speak, you can focus on things that really humans do best, which is how do you strategically approach the account? So we do a lot of research. Part of our research is not just finding attributional information about the account, but actually we actively look for signals that matter to your business. And that's the one key difference, I would say, between what we do and a lot of firms. We have focused our technology primarily on discovering um, buying signals in our research. And that what we found, by the way, when I was doing account-based marketing with Triblio, I had a lot of exposure to intent data products like Bombora and a bunch of others, right? And one of the things I'll say about that is that those products are not so much intent. It's not so much in buyer intent data, but really topical interest data. They tell you, hey, this this company triggered on this topical keyword. It has very, depending on the business, it may have very little to do with a true buying opportunity. What I found in my discussions with salespeople and SDRs is that when you're looking for signals for your business, 80% of the most meaningful signals are particular to your business. I don't want to say custom to your business. They're very particular to your business. And today, a lot of that is manually derived. Let me give you an example. Like, I was talking to a company and they said, hey, we sell CRMs to small retailers. And the great time, we monitor 1,500 small retailers all over North America. The great time for us to reach out to these small retailers is when they announce new store openings. I can't buy that data anywhere, right? I actually have to like go and look for these announcements. Or someone that told me recently, oh, we sell contract lifecycle management software to, and our target buyer is the SMB and mid-market. And I said, what's the signal that's important to you? When someone is trying to hire, when a company is trying to hire for the legal ops role, I was
Mhm.
like, why? Why that? Well, because legal ops, which I didn't even know existed as a title, it's like marketing ops, but for a legal department. It's like, yeah, that shows that particular company in the midst of the sea of companies, that particular company is investing in using tech to modernize their legal department. And that's why they need a legal ops person. But that's actually a very good candidate for us to approach with our technology. So a lot of these today are manually derived. They're very particular to your business. And really that's what we solve for is we help you research and find these, and that saves you a lot of time. We also do things like craft an outbound message for you. And that we do it, a lot of other people do it. But the thing that we really do well is this idea of doing research and being able to uncover signals for you to act on.
Um, Real quick, also, I think about like another hot company out there is clay.com. Uh,
Yeah.
have you heard about them
Yep.
and what they do? What do you think about What do you think about their tool? If you played around with it at all, or like, have you? How do you think about
Yeah.
that in terms of like landscape?
Yeah, I think they're obviously a very hot tool, especially in the Bay Area. A lot of people using it. I would say, first of all, I um, I heard a podcast from their founder recently. I don't know, it was a TechCrunch podcast or something like that, and just it's great that they've been on a journey for a long time. They're not, it seems like they just emerged from nowhere, but
Seven
if I'm
years.
to understand it exactly. So first of all, as a founder, much respect for someone who is plugging away for 7 years trying to find product market fit, and kudos to them that they persevered and found it, right? So from my perspective, nothing but, you know, congratulations and admiration for that kind of perseverance and kind of persistence and smarts to be able to figure it out. But and then in the landscape, I would say they're really taken off with what I call the growth hacker community. So I think that's where they've been really really successful, and I think they do some of the thing. I think people use them to do some of the things that we say, which is discover signals as well. They help you, but I think they're definitely oriented around the growth hacker and people with that certain skill set. And to be honest, I think they're very successful in that, and their tool is built well for that persona user.
Got it. And you're thinking more so of like larger sales teams, organizational.
Yeah, larger sales teams, but also sales teams. Our AI assistant, right? Salespeople don't have the time to do the things like you can do with Clay and like I said, it's a great tool. Most sales teams don't have the time to do that, right? So I think we're trying to aim for a different buyer and a different use case in terms of a sort of day-to-day user pattern.
Yeah. A last question here is just again, I think like to go back to the idea of channels, right? Like if you, to me, I think about it this way, which is like, with Clay's success and yes, the growth hackers and all that stuff, let's just say you're targeting your customers, right, are all targeting, the attention, which to me, like
Hmm.
attention is a commodity with an assigned value, right? Um,
Hmm.
you're all targeting the attention of a specific persona at XYZ ICP, right? Um,
Hmm.
I think of ICP as a company and then persona, the individuals within the company will
Hmm.
make a decision. And so in my mind, that persona is now dealing with not just one software category or one category of companies, but they're probably dealing with like 10, 15, sometimes it depends on their department, but they're probably dealing with multiple categories and all the players within those categories vying for their attention, all using different types of tools, some very sophisticated tools, some still manually grinding away, some doing spray and pray methodology, right? How is that persona able to discern what is actually valuable with a finite amount of time? As you mentioned, like how do they go through
Hmm.
1,000
Yeah.
letters that's in their mailbox?
Yeah, I think you know, it, I was alluding earlier. Sorry, that's my dog barking. Uh, I think earlier I was alluding to this conversation I had with my CTO about I'm a co-founder and CTO about that exam the paradigm of like having the personalized note in the thousand the mailbox with 1,000. But he in our discussion he said something that I think is very very true, which is this: when when you send something to me that meets my need at the optimal time, I pay attention to it. The example he gave was we were looking for SOC 2 audit, and we got our SOC 2 type 2 audit. But like he said, during the time when I was looking for SOC 2, it doesn't matter how well your email was written. It could have been a really poorly worded email, but at the time I'm looking for it, if your email came in or I'm thinking about possibly doing it in the next 90 days and your email came, I would pay attention to it, right? even in the midst of all that, he said it would have caught my attention, and I would have, now, of course, I might miss some, but you may have to send it 2 or 3 emails, but I would. And so to me, this is why I think one of the most important things, you are absolutely right, Chris. We are living in an attention economy, and it's very difficult to get attention. Never been more difficult, arguably, than right now. But that's why signals are so important. When you find the right signal at the right time, and someone's hiring for legal ops, they're ramping up, let's say their legal ops department, you reach out to me at the time. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but you're reaching out to me at a more likely time where I'm thinking of scaling my legal ops department and I'm investing in technology. That's the time you want to reach out to me, right? So that's why I think, look, outbound is a difficult thing. In a lot of ways, it's broken. It's very noisy. There's an attention deficit challenge we have to deal with, but you can still get the attention if you are relevant in the moment to the buyer, right? And so I think that's really the answer, and that's why we think signals are the most important thing, and we're building our product around that. So,
Got it. Cool. On that note, I will let you go, and I want to just say thank you so much for your time, sharing a lot about your experience as a multiple time founder, and then also what you're building with Tiga. Yeah, I think it sounds super interesting.
yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me, and really enjoyed it, and love to stay in touch.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Take care.